Yeah, this is the aspect of Xi Jinping governance that clearly I have issues with. But who the fuck am I? I'm just a Western chauvinist pig living in a country that's black bagging political dissent currently, including my kind of political dissent. So, that is so crazy. What is this? As an American from a semi-affluent upper middle class background, this video is full of knowledge I've craved and have been denied by uninformed ideologues and Western media. Thank you. This is from 4 months ago from a channel called Red Pen, a summary of Xi Jinping's governance of China. I kind of want to watch this. That is so crazy. All right. Let's get to a summary of Xi Jinping's governance of China from this channel called Red Pen.
Governance of China is a 4-volume collection of speeches and writings by Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, which outlines the official party
We're doing it. We're diving into it.
perspective on China's development in the 21st century. The writings encompass Xi Jinping's views on economics, domestic and international politics, infrastructure, technology, environmentalism, peaceful coexistence, and military affairs.
He looks hotter now.
The Governance of China is a unique text because it is a book written from a global historical perspective by a statesman with the power to actually shape the future course of a major country. Through an extensive grasp on Chinese as well as Western history and literature, Xi Jinping not only articulates the intricacies of China's internal development, but relates China's development to its growing role in global politics. The text does not present a Western-style critique of capitalism, couched in the language of negation and idealism, but instead presents a tangible framework for concrete steps in the arduous struggle of building a communist society. With the rise of the People's Republic of China, its growing power on the global stage, as well as an emerging soft power conflict with the West, it is increasingly important that the world understands what China is doing, how it got here, where it is headed, and how nations across the world factor into this world historic transformation seen with the rise of socialist China. China's relationship to Marxism-Leninism began in the early 20th century during a time of significant social and political upheaval. The country experienced several major internal struggles for a long period of time, including the Taiping Rebellion in the mid-19th century, the Boxer Rebellion at the dawn of the 20th century, and the overthrow of the Qing dynasty in 1911. The fall of the Qing dynasty was followed by the fragmentation of China into regions controlled by warlords and the Kuomintang, leaving the country in chaos and vulnerable to foreign powers. It wasn't until the 1917 Russian Revolution that the Chinese saw a clear example of how Marxism-Leninism could be applied to overthrow a repressive regime and establish a socialist state. Inspired by the developments in Russia, Chinese intellectuals began to explore Marxism-Leninism as a solution to China's problems, which quickly led to the 1919 Democratic Revolution and the founding of the Communist Party of China in 1921. Mao Zedong, a key member of the party,
Hot. Okay, 125 is better. 15 might be too fast.
played a crucial role in adapting Marxism-Leninism to China's specific conditions and predominantly rural population. His interpretation of Marxism-Leninism, known as Mao Zedong thought, emphasized the potential of the peasantry rather than the proletariat as the revolutionary class, marking a significant departure from classical Marxism but demonstrating the flexibility of Marxist theory in different historical and social contexts. Under Mao's leadership throughout the 1930s and 40s, the Communist Party engaged in various struggles against warlords, Kuomintang nationalists, and foreign invaders, notably during the Second Sino-Japanese War. In building the People's Liberation Army, the party recognized the importance of military strength and leadership. As Xi Jinping states, while it was engaged in violent struggle, the party came to recognize the irrefutable truth that it must command the gun and build a people's military of its own. Chinese people learned that it was an imperative to send the aggressors a message they would understand. War must be fought to deter aggression. Force must be met with force, and a victory is the best way to win peace and respect. We Chinese people do not provoke others, nor do we shy away from trouble. We do not give in to fear or yield in the face of difficulties and dangers. The Chinese nation will never cower before threats or be subdued by oppressors. By 1949, the communist victory in the Chinese Civil War and the establishment of the People's Republic of China marked the triumph of Marxism-Leninism in China and validated its significance in the Chinese Revolution. Over the past 95 years, the Communist Party of China has accomplished so many tasks which were thought to be impossible by other political forces. The reason for this...
It's interesting because their response to the tariffs was literally verbatim one-to-one this statement.
...has been precisely attributed to our adoption of Marxism as our guide of action. This has allowed our party to free itself from the limitations of all previous political forces, which focused on pursuing their own special interests. Departing from or abandoning Marxism, the party would lose its soul and direction. On the issue of Marxism as the fundamental guiding thought, we should not waver under any circumstances.
And for the record, one thing that I want to mention here, we're going to talk about Xi Jinping, but of course you can't do that without establishing Maoist thought in China, and this is his opinion on Mao in his own words. Obviously, Maoism in the United States of America is not, no, that's not, don't get mad at me, but I don't think it's going to work. You know what I mean? Although there have been a lot of successful revolutionary initiatives in the United States of America that have been motivated by Mao. The Black Panther Party comes to mind, okay? The material conditions of the United States are not, it's just incredibly, I want to say difficult, but it's just not going to happen. It's just not a thing. We don't have that. The Iowa peasant Maoist revolution will happen. No, how dare you? One day.
Following the death of Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping rose to prominence and initiated the policy of reform and opening up in 1978. Reform and opening up recognized the dialectical necessity of adapting to changing conditions and constantly developing theory to guide necessary changes in practice. For China, the overall purpose of development is to open up to the world through globalization, cultural exchange, and knowledge sharing. The process of opening up produces outcomes that cause changes in the social structure that require reform. Reform and opening up is therefore seen by the Communist Party of China as an ongoing and holistic process that will continue on indefinitely. Deng Xiaoping designed and led the Reform and Opening Up initiative and the modernization drive with a view to improving the well-being of the Chinese people, stressing on many occasions that poverty.
You need to ask clip channels to upload to Bilibili, tons of views, lots of coins, high engagement, and the Chinese netizens glaze you like I've never seen before, calling you a wise foreign scholar who knows the real truth but is depressed that he is unable to change the course of history. That is, dude, why do netizens talk like poets? The average, is it just like a translation thing? I don't understand. Anytime I read any Chinese netizen online, they all sound like fucking scholars, dude. Amazing.
Poverty is not socialism. Socialism
means
I
mean Mao Zedong thought.
Eliminating poverty. Unless you are developing the productive forces and raising people's living standards, you cannot say that you are building socialism. This policy marked a pragmatic shift towards prioritizing economic development over strict ideological purity, emphasizing the use of market mechanisms to develop the productive forces. The reforms introduced under Deng Xiaoping included decollectivizing agriculture, establishing special economic zones.
Yeah, for me, I've said the Genghis Gambit, as is demonstrated by Chinese prosperity over the last couple of decades, it worked out. You know what I mean? You can have your criticisms, but it kind of worked out demonstrably.
And encouraging foreign investment. The new theoretical and practical foundations of reform and opening up allowed the Chinese economy to achieve swift growth, which accelerated rapidly after China's entrance into the World Trade Organization in 2001.
And also, it would not have worked if they had completely kept liberalizing the economy, for the record. It would not have worked without what Xi Jinping has done as well, which is why I think it's important. It's important to recognize Xi's initiative here as well.
Many criticized the party's embrace of pro-market reforms and integration into the capitalist world economy. But Deng Xiaoping and every paramount leader after him demonstrated that the process of moving towards the lofty ideal of communism unfolds at an incremental and gradual pace. Deng Xiaoping always understood that developing the forces of production would be a lengthy process and that China had a long march down the socialist road before approaching a new stage of socialist development. Reform and opening up catalyzed Chinese economic development, lifted hundreds of millions out of absolute poverty, and laid the groundwork for the development of what would become known as socialism with Chinese characteristics. Xi Jinping explains that this concept embraces a dialectical view of socialism that integrates the universal ideals of Marxism and socialism with China's unique historical and material conditions. Socialism with Chinese characteristics represents a theory, path, and system of how China will further advance down the socialist road through the implementation of theory into the practice of statecraft. The evolving nature of the theory is based on the necessity of informing practice based on changing conditions and the needs of the people as a whole. Xi Jinping describes it as a holistic theory that conceptualizes Chinese society in its totality. Every institution, policy, campaign, and long-term plan is informed by the lofty goal of achieving communism, correcting erroneous views and decisions, and unifying all mindsets, policies, and measures to carry China beyond the primary stage of socialism. Socialism with Chinese characteristics is built on the foundation of Marxism-Leninism and Mao Zedong thought, which offer basic scientific principles for understanding the world through a dialectical materialist worldview. Marxism-Leninism is seen as a universally applicable theory, while Mao Zedong thought represents this theory under specifically Chinese conditions. On top of this foundation is Deng Xiaoping theory, Jiang Zemin's concept of the three represents, and Hu Jintao's scientific outlook on development. Each of these contributions to socialism with Chinese characteristics is understood to be temporally determined or specific to unique circumstances at a given historical period of China's development. For example, in 2004, as China's growing market economy intensified social inequalities, Jiang Zemin found it necessary to reiterate and solidify the party's commitment to people-centered and socialist development by introducing the three represents into the party constitution, ensuring the equal representation of economic, cultural, and people-centered development in governmental affairs. Lastly, the most recent contribution to socialism with Chinese characteristics has come from Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping thought marks a significant turning point in Chinese development and the theory of socialism with Chinese characteristics. The term thought has not been used to describe the theory of any paramount leader since Mao, which signifies a deeper level of importance to the contribution. But furthermore, since achieving moderate prosperity in all respects, Xi Jinping emphasizes that China has entered a new stage of development and makes frequent reference to socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. In 1997, Jiang Zemin introduced the concept of the two centenary goals: to achieve a moderately prosperous society in all respects by 2021, the centenary of the Communist Party of China, and to achieve a modern socialist country that is prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced, harmonious, and beautiful by 2049, the centenary of the People's Republic of China. The two centenary goals were taken up and popularized by Xi Jinping, who elevated them into a central theoretical component of socialism with Chinese characteristics, and used them as a national call for the Chinese people to continue pushing towards national rejuvenation. Working towards moderate prosperity in all respects saw remarkable progress in poverty reduction. From the end of 2012 to the end of 2017, the rural poor population decreased by 68.53 million, or about 70%. On average, 13.7 million people were lifted out of poverty annually, which was more than double the annual rate of reduction during previous poverty reduction programs. By 2020, all people in these regions were guaranteed food, clothing, compulsory education, basic medical care, and safe housing. Poverty-stricken rural areas saw increased rates of growth, family disposable income, and basic public services. China's poverty alleviation achievements are the culmination of people-centered development and economic planning. Throughout the first several decades of China's reform and opening up, means of production were used to produce means of production in order to catch up with the West. However, with the achievement of moderate prosperity in all respects, China's high-tech sector is now quickly approaching and even surpassing the West, standing at the cutting edge of scientific and technological breakthroughs in the fields of AI, quantum information, mobile communication, blockchain, synthetic biology, gene editing, regenerative medicine, cosmology, robotics, and many others. Throughout the late 20th century, Chinese workers produced goods that were exported abroad rather than consumed at home. However, the economic success experienced throughout the 21st century has allowed for greater considerations to be made regarding people's well-being, the natural environment, and social justice. China's new economic strategy emphasizes high-quality development that is innovative, coordinated, green, open, and inclusive. As Xi Jinping says, we must put
I cannot take any of this seriously. You cannot protest in China. You will get arrested if they don't like what you have to say. Just one example of how dangerous the Chinese government is. Any claims of socialism seem like straight up propaganda. I'd rather live there than the U.S. though. Bro, given the current administration's initiatives in terms of removing due process and also destroying the First Amendment, we literally are getting all of the worst aspects that you claim China has and none of the high-speed rail. So yes, your final statement on the matter is what is perhaps most important.
Put the people's interests first. Under no circumstances can we ever alter our standpoint of breathing the same air as the people and sharing a common future with them. Nor can we forget our purpose, which is to serve the people wholeheartedly. Nor can we discard the view of historical materialism that the people are the real heroes. Serving the people wholeheartedly and always representing the fundamental interests of the greatest possible majority of the people are the important preconditions and foundation for the implementation and development of consultative democracy. According to Xi Jinping, from 2021 to 2035, China will build on the foundations created by its moderately prosperous society with 14 more years of hard work to ensure that socialist modernization is generally realized. The party's vision is that by the end of this stage, China's economic and technological strength will have increased significantly, the rights of the people will be adequately protected, social etiquette and civility will be enhanced, people will lead more comfortable lives, the size of the middle income group will have grown significantly, a modern social governance system will have taken shape, and society will be full of vitality, harmonious, and orderly. Xi Jinping emphasizes that this process represents the movement towards the higher stage of socialism. Achieving communism is the highest ideal of the communist.
I'm sorry. I do want to say, can you imagine Donald Trump writing 4 volumes on anything, really? Like actually him, even getting someone to dictate his thoughts about how we will move America into a transitional phase where America will become the manufacturing hub of the world, and how he's going to make capital owners collaborate with his agenda of prosperity. Like, motherfucker's barely literate. I still don't believe he knows how to read. That's just something. Yeah, art of the deal. I know. Our art of the deal, baby. That's his 4 volumes of Donald Trump thought, expanding on how to con better, which I guess is the capitalist version. It's a perfect representation of capitalism in and of itself, you know? A watered down version of how to be a better con man, reduced to something that was ghost written.
Party of China, and party members, particularly party officials, should maintain a firm belief in lofty communist ideals, along with the common ideal of building socialism with Chinese characteristics, and pursue them with dedication. Xi Jinping recognizes that capital still has an important role to play in China's modernization efforts, and encourages its orderly regulation rather than abolition. He says that after the launch of the reform and opening up, we broke free from a restrictive mindset on ownership and came to realize that capital, as a major factor of production, can serve as a tool for the market to allocate resources and an effective means to grow the economy. Yet we must be aware that capital is profit-driven in nature, and if unregulated and unconstrained, it will cause immeasurable damage to the economy and society. The 2008 global financial crisis has taught us that allowing capital to blindly pursue profit will result in chaos, and that
this is why I always ironically maintain a position that while it is a transitional socialist state, in its transition, this unironically is what like the social democrats in theory want, right? That's why it's so funny and nothing but pure chauvinism when European sockdems will be like, China is a tanky haven. It's like fucking bullshit. It's awful. It's like, dude, they're literally currently in practice doing what you claim is what you want to do in your country. Obviously, there's additional safeguards beyond that. Their attitude towards private property is very different, and I think that is a really important distinction that turns it into a transitional socialist state potentially, rather than simply one that wants to maintain a capitalist order of the economy. But in practice, this right here is unironically what SOCDEMs claim they want, right?
Global prosperity cannot be built on the shaky foundations of a market without moral constraints.
This is what I mean, for the record, when I say I want this in America, okay? I believe that America would prosper if they did this. This is what I say when I am talking about, like, China does a lot of good shit. I wish we could do them here. Why can't we do them here? This is what I'm talking about.
The growing gap between rich and poor is both unfair and unsustainable. It is important for us to use both the invisible hand and the visible hand to form synergy between market forces and government functions, and strive to achieve both efficiency and fairness. We must set up traffic lights for capital flows. Traffic on the road needs to be controlled with traffic lights. Likewise, capital also needs to be regulated. No capital of any type can be allowed to run out of control. We must prevent the unchecked growth of capital and combat monopolies, exorbitant profits, sky-high prices, destructive speculation, and unfair competition. We must reinforce effective regulation of capital in accordance with the law. The socialist market economy is law-based, and capital must operate in accordance with the law. Curbing the disorderly expansion of capital is not intended to deny its worth, but to ensure its orderly growth. To regulate capital, we should strictly enforce the relevant laws and regulations and improve those that are incomplete. We must support the healthy growth of capital through regulation and guidance. The 2021 centenary goal of achieving a moderately prosperous society in all respects was tied to achieving quantitative benchmarks in economic development, such as the elimination of absolute poverty, increasing the numbers of the middle class through elevated living standards, growing the GDP of the country through technological innovations and advancements, and closing the gap between rural and urban economies. However, after 2021, when these benchmarks had been surpassed, greater focus shifted towards qualitative standards, such as high-tech, people-oriented, and green development. Xi Jinping's vision for the future of China is of a green, environmentally sustainable, and beautiful nation, leading the world in sustainable technologies and development to move towards a model of ecological civilization. He explains the necessity of green development for China by pointing out that the total population of well-off countries in the world is about 1 billion. China has more than 1.3 billion people. If we are all to become modernized, the well-off population must more than double. If we were to consume as much energy and production in daily lives as the present well-off people do, all of the existing resources in the world would be far from enough for us. The old path seems to be a dead end. Where is the new road?
This is ironically Matt Iglesias' thought right there, but sustainable. There is already 1 billion Americans. It's China. But if there are to be 1 billion Americans, then that would be unsustainable to exist on this planet because of the consumption. And therefore, there is a necessity to use renewable energies to evolve.
It lies in scientific and technological innovation and in the accelerated transition from factor-driven and investment-driven growth to innovation-driven growth. In an overall effort of progressing towards a future that is both prosperous and sustainable, China's high-tech sector continues to develop new green technologies, such as electric vehicles, hydropower, nuclear energy, energy storage systems, smart grids, green infrastructure, solar and wind energy, as well as carbon capture technologies. We should endeavor to build a green, clean, and beautiful world. The Earth is the only shared home for humanity. Now, a few individuals are trying to find a new home in outer space, but that is still a distant dream. In the foreseeable future, human beings still need to live on this planet. This is a fact that will not change. We must defend the Earth's boundaries, both tangible and intangible, to ensure harmony between humanity and nature. We need to improve planning regarding our territorial space, implement our functional zoning strategy, and draw up red lines for ecological conservation. We should accelerate efforts to establish a system of nature reserves, improve biodiversity protection networks, and set reasonable spatial limits for economic and social activities. We will never again seek economic growth at the cost of the environment.
Bro, don't show this to fucking Republicans. They're gonna tell you that climate change is a Chinese conspiracy.
China's rule of law functions as one of the primary means of cultivating a harmonious society of internal stability and social order, where conflicts are managed in the interests of overall social cohesion. The Democratic People's Dictatorship is composed of the 4 classes of Chinese society: the national bourgeoisie, the petty bourgeoisie, workers, and farmers. Deng Xiaoping pointed out that although China's socialist economy and political system were imperfect, they have continued to improve and are much better than the capitalist system, based on the law of the jungle and the principle of getting ahead at the expense of others. Our system will improve more and more with the passage of time. By absorbing the progressive elements of other countries, it will become the best in the world. Capitalism can never achieve this. Elsewhere, he added, democracy in capitalist societies is bourgeois democracy. In fact, it is the democracy of monopoly capitalists. It is no more than a system of multi-party elections, separation of judicial, executive, and legislative powers, and a bicameral legislature. Ours is the system of the People's Congress and the People's Democracy, under the leadership of the Communist Party. We cannot adopt the practices of the West. The great advantage of the socialist system is that when the central leadership makes a decision, it is promptly implemented without interference from any other quarters. In contrast to the Anglo-American legal system, based on the supposed separation of legal powers, the Chinese system was created through a combination of socialist innovation and traditional Chinese practices to produce a legal system that is not only functional, but also promotes harmony and moral virtue by reflecting the democratic will of the Chinese people. According to Xi Jinping, Chinese law epitomizes the ethos and wisdom of the Chinese nation and contains many excellent ideas and concepts worth passing on. These include the governance strategy of enforcing public discipline through the application of both morality and law, the people-centered concept that the people are the foundation of the state, and only when the foundation is solid will the state be stable, the wish for social harmony without lawsuits, the idea of prudence that prioritizes moral enlightenment over legal punishment, the concept of equality that advocates passing judgment in accordance with the law and ensures that the punishment fits the crime, and the principle of leniency towards widowers.
By the way, this is the reason why, while the party does have top-down control or like final say on matters, it gets its notes from a localized structure where the initiatives that they take on are directly after consultation and demands that they hear from virtually every side of China, virtually every aspect of China. That's why you see the fucking People's Congress, where like they come in from people wearing like indigenous garb, coming in from all over the place. Like the Cuban system has a similar, the Cuban structure has a similar, the Cuban government has a similar structure of governance. And while it's still a obviously a one party system, clearly there are there's room for disagreement within the party, and the people are still locally elected.
Widows, orphans, childless couples, the elderly, children, women, and people with disabilities. All of these shed light on the wisdom of Chinese traditional legal culture. Despite the many examples of Chinese law reflecting the democratic will of the masses, Western critics insist on characterizing the Chinese system as authoritarian, framing China as desiring to expand its control outward. But Xi Jinping responds to these accusations by reiterating that China will never seek hegemony. As China continues to grow, some people start to worry. Some take a dark view of China and assume that it will inevitably become a threat as it develops further. They even portray China as being a terrifying Mephisto who will someday suck the soul of the world. Such absurdity couldn't be more ridiculous, yet some people, regrettably, never tire of preaching it. This shows that prejudice is indeed hard to overcome.
Subtweet. Call out.
In addressing the question of whether the party is above the law, Xi Jinping stated, "This question itself is problematic and is a political trap. We must leave no room for confusion."
More like Xi Jinping.
But answer the question clearly. Party leadership and law-based governance are not in conflict, but inherently coherent. Our country's laws embody the will of the party and the people, and our party acts in accordance with the law, which manifests an inseparable relationship between the two. All party members should keep in mind that the party leadership is the soul of our country's socialist rule of law and the biggest difference between Chinese and Western rule of law. China is the fourth largest country in terms of geographic territory, the second most populous country with 1.4 billion people, the world's second largest national economy, and it holds a permanent seat on the UN Security Council.
Someone just said, this guy sure acts democratic, but doesn't allow elections. I like that we're watching an entire video about the Xi Jinping governance of China, and there are still chatters in here being like, no, they don't have elections. Yes, they do. Instead of having a fake duopoly, they have a one-party structure, but local elections are what matters in that structure. Of course they have fucking elections. It is pretty funny to have this conversation in the United States of America. Of course, it'll never not be funny because we very clearly have a bourgeois democratic process that does not reflect the interests of the citizenry, something that many of you are aware of. And that's why I always say America is a democratic country in theory, and yet not so much in practice. And that people have very understandable, very visible demands, and yet those demands are never reflected in the legislative body. And the legislative body itself has already been like destroyed of its power regardless. Multi-party parliamentary structures also run into the same issues as well, where there are socialist parties at the end of the day in said parliamentary structures, but they're usually junior coalition partners. And also on top of that, hold on, fuck, I'm spilling everywhere. There are still bourgeois democracies, and therefore still very much reflective of the same two like power centers. Basically, you have like a left coalition, a right coalition, constantly fighting against one another. But when it comes down to representing the interests of capital, they still do the exact same thing that the American duopoly does.
However, China's economic underdevelopment has historically hindered its ability to outwardly exercise power or influence. Progress towards the Chinese dream of national rejuvenation is therefore also tied to the party's desire to restore China's pride and place on the world stage. Xi Jinping's vision for China's global role is deeply influenced by the principles of peaceful coexistence and mutual benefit. China's approach to international relations is governed by the idea that all countries should pursue development that is inclusive and beneficial to all parties involved. Xi Jinping has frequently spoken of the need to build a global community of shared future, where nations work together to address common challenges and achieve mutual prosperity. China's commitment to peaceful coexistence is reflected in its opposition to protectionism and economic hegemony. Xi Jinping has made it clear that China is firmly against any form of protectionism and is willing to resolve economic and trade differences through consultation rather than confrontation. This stance is part of China's broader strategy to promote the establishment of a multilateral trade system characterized by balanced and mutually beneficial development. By advocating for a rules-based international order, China seeks to ensure that global economic governance is fair and inclusive, allowing all nations to benefit from globalization. It is important for all countries to pursue inclusive development for the benefit of all. To lead a happy life is the common aspiration of people all over the world. The progress of human society requires a continued effort from all countries to further opening up, cooperation, and win-win development, and reject isolation, confrontation, and monopoly. In a world of deeper economic globalization, the pursuit of the law of the jungle and winner takes all leads nowhere. Inclusive growth for all is surely the right way forward. Countries need to rise above differences and leverage their respective strengths to pursue inclusive growth in the face of common risks and challenges. This way, people of all countries will be able to share in the benefits of economic globalization and global growth. One of the most significant expressions of China's commitment to peaceful development and mutual benefit is the Belt and Road Initiative. Launched in 2013, the Belt and Road Initiative is a global economic development strategy that aims to enhance connectivity and cooperation between countries across Asia, Europe, and Africa. The initiative is a manifestation of Xi Jinping's vision for an open and inclusive world order, where economic cooperation is not based on ideological alignment or geopolitical considerations, but on mutual benefit. China has grown from a poor and weak country to the second largest economy, not through military expansion or colonial plunder, but through the hard work of its people and their efforts to uphold peace. China will never waver in its pursuit of peaceful development. No matter how strong its economy grows, China will never seek hegemony, expansion, or spheres of influence. History has borne this out, and will continue to do so. We will not, however, accept condescending sermons from those who feel they have the right to lecture us. China shares a common destiny with all third world countries. China will never seek hegemony or bully others, but will always side with the third world, and China will oppose any forms of hegemony and safeguard world peace. Xi Jinping has repeatedly emphasized that the Belt and Road Initiative is not a geopolitical or military alliance, but an economic initiative aimed at fostering global development. The Belt and Road Initiative was launched in response to the call for reforming the global governance system. It is an open and inclusive process that does not exclude any party. It is not designed to form an exclusive bloc or China club. Its participation is not based on ideology, and is certainly not a zero-sum game. Any country that wants to participate in this initiative is welcome to do so. China's approach to international relations is also characterized by a strong commitment to the principles of non-interference and respect for sovereignty. Informed by its own historical experiences under foreign domination, China is acutely sensitive to the rights of other nations to self-determination. This sensitivity is reflected in China's adherence to the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence: mutual respect for territorial integrity, mutual non-aggression, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, mutual benefit, and peaceful coexistence with regard to ideological differences. We have never abused, oppressed, or subjugated the people of any other country, and we never will. By the same token, we will never allow any foreign force to abuse, oppress, or subjugate us. Anyone who would attempt to do so would find themselves on a collision course with a great wall of steel forged by over 1.4 billion Chinese people. Big countries should treat smaller ones as equals instead of acting as hegemons, imposing their wills on others. A country cannot have security while others are in turmoil, as threats facing other countries are likely to haunt it too. When neighbors are in trouble, instead of strengthening one's own forces, one should extend a helping hand to them. As the saying goes, united we stand, divided we fall. All countries should pursue common, comprehensive, and sustainable security through cooperation. For all the rhetoric about a clash of civilizations or the superiority of one civilization over another, it is the diversity of civilizations that sustains human progress. Indeed, mutual learning between different cultures is a shared aspiration of all peoples. The People's Republic of China has overcome monumental tasks in liberating itself from the century of humiliation and tackling major social problems. Victory in the Korean War, eradicating widespread opium addiction, and lifting hundreds of millions out of poverty are only a few examples of the monumental achievements by China under the People's Republic. However, China still faces challenges that are deeply rooted in the past. One of the greatest and most persistent challenges facing China today is the need for national reunification with Taiwan. When China was a weak country, the Japanese invaded and occupied Taiwan, inflicting a traumatic experience on all Chinese people on both sides of the straits. While Taiwan was under Japanese occupation, many Taiwanese shed their blood and laid down their lives to fight against this encroachment on China's sovereignty, proving they were inseparable members from the extended family of the Chinese nation. The Chinese nation has an honorable tradition of opposing division and safeguarding unity. Secessionism directed towards Taiwan independence is the greatest obstacle to national reunification and a grave danger to national rejuvenation. Those who forget their roots, betray their motherland, and seek to split the country will come to no good end. They will be condemned by the people and indicted by history. Taiwan is seen by Xi Jinping as an inalienable part of China, and the Taiwan question as a wound left by history. He states that the blood of the Chinese nation flows in every Chinese person, and the bond between people on both sides of the Taiwan Straits cannot be altered by any force. We people on both sides of the Taiwan Straits are Chinese and share a natural affinity and national identity built on kinship and mutual assistance, a fact that can never be altered by any force or any people. Xi Jinping invites all Chinese on both sides of the Taiwan Straits to recognize their common history, reunite as a people, and share in China's growing prosperity. We must handle cross-straits relations on the basis of a clear understanding of the trend of history. The great renewal of the Chinese nation has never been closer thanks to the tireless efforts of all the sons and daughters of China. We should view from high ground the great trend of history with changing times and the rise of the Chinese nation, and realize
Bro, this guy goes, this channel does so much propaganda. Dude, it is a summarization of Xi Jinping's governance of China, like his own book. He's barely adding any additional thoughts to it. Of course, it's going to be reflective of Xi Jinping's own personal thoughts about his own personal affairs. It's so funny when people just go like, oh my God, I can't believe Xi Jinping wrote his own thoughts about where he wants to take Chinese development, and he didn't talk about all of the negatives. It's so funny. Every time we talk about China, chatters forget that like they're human beings that have the capacity to also exaggerate or be biased. Like the concept of someone writing a book about themselves all of a sudden is elusive to the average chatter because it's a Chinese person that wrote a book. It's the same as like it's the same principle behind like the New York Times writing an article about like a new Chinese museum opening up in Beijing that whitewashes Chinese history. And it's like, yeah, no shit. That's what fucking museums do. What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? Everyone turns into a fucking the wokest radlib anarchist when it comes to talking about our foreign adversaries. This isn't to say that it's right or appropriate, but just, you know, match it with the same energy that you have for American governance.
that the peaceful development of cross-straits relations has become part and parcel of China's great renewal. Sooner or later, we will have to resolve the political disputes that have long existed in cross-straits relations rather than leave them to later generations. No one should underestimate the resolve, the will, and the ability of the Chinese people to defend our national sovereignty and territorial integrity. The complete reunification of our country can and will be realized. While historic challenges such as
This right here is the most significant factor of Xi Jinping thought, or rather his actions. Look, I am but a mere peasant when it comes to understanding 5,000 years of Chinese tradition. But from what I have seen with my limited capabilities as a Westerner pig, an Angloid, if you will, this aspect of Xi Jinping's governance has been perhaps one of the most consequential. A lot of people will look to this and say, oh, it's because he like eradicated dissent within the party structure. But in fact, I think that the downsides of liberalization created the predictable capitalist forces gaining as much power as possible, as is the case in social democracies. When capitalist forces get more favor and more leverage and more power, they inevitably enact their own personal agendas that undermine the direction of an entire nation state like China trying to become a transitional socialist state. One of the most consequential parts of Xi Jinping's agenda was to make sure that all of the dissenters within the party that benefited from the bounties of liberalization would have to forcibly get back into the party structure. And if they did not play ball, then they would lose out on their wealth. Because unchecked greed of this sort, of course, is going to inevitably cause the same austerity principles, the undermining of the democratic agenda, the undermining of the people's will, as you have seen over and over again in social democracies in Europe.
National reunification continue to persist from the past, the new era is also giving rise to new challenges. Perhaps the greatest and most threatening problem confronting China in the new era is the threat to the Communist Party's authority amid the growing economic power of the national bourgeoisie.
Yeah.
If the economic power of the national bourgeoisie is translated into political power, it threatens to strengthen counter-revolutionary tendencies and drag the country back into factionalism, violence, and chaos. Therefore, the party keeps tight controls and regulations on the economic power of the national bourgeoisie in order to suppress its political power. This is also why Xi Jinping frames corruption as an existential threat facing the party. The biggest threat our party faces as a governing party is corruption. Facts prove that if corruption is allowed to spread, it will eventually lead to the destruction of a party and the fall of a government. In combating corruption and upholding integrity, we must also oppose ideas and practices smacking of privilege. Members of the Communist Party of China are at all times ordinary members of the working people. Party members are only entitled to some personal benefits and job-related functions and powers prescribed by law and policies, and must not seek any personal gain or privilege over and above those. Combating corruption means upholding the party's commitment to the people and the high ideals of communism. The party came to power through unwavering dedication to the people, demonstrating unparalleled sacrifices in serving their interests. And today's leaders have large shoes to fill in upholding the legacy of the party and continuing the long march down the socialist road. Through China's revolution, development, and reform, innumerable party members laid down their lives for the cause of the party and the people. What supported them was the moral strength gained from the utmost importance they attached to their revolutionary ideals. Some are skeptical about communism, considering it a fantasy that will never come true. Some do not believe in Marxism-Leninism, but in ghosts and gods, seeking spiritual solace in feudal superstitions, showing intense interest in fortune-telling, worship of Buddha, and God's advice for solving their problems. Some have little sense of principle, justice, or right and wrong, and perform their duties in a muddle-headed manner. Some even yearn for Western social systems and values, losing their confidence in the future of socialism. And others adopt an equivocal attitude towards political provocations against the leadership of the Communist Party of China, the path of socialism with Chinese characteristics, and other matters of principle. They passively avoid relevant arguments without the courage to express their opinions, or even deliberately deliver ambiguous messages. Isn't it a monstrous absurdity that party officials, especially high-ranking ones, take no position in the face of major issues of principle, political incidents, and sensitive issues? As part of its efforts to combat party corruption and promote upright public officials, party discipline is enforced from the highest to lowest ranks. All party members are mandated to learn the teachings of Marx, Engels, Lenin, Mao, Deng Xiaoping theory, the Three Represents, the scientific outlook on development, and Xi Jinping thought to grasp the history, outlook, tactics, strategies, and goals of the party. Xi Jinping emphasizes that studying these works helps ensure ideological unity, strengthen the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party, and guide future governance. Learning from past leaders and adapting Marxism to China's evolving needs helps maintain political stability, reinforce party discipline, and address modern challenges while promoting a distinct Chinese path forward. Xi Jinping asserts that communism is not as simple as a meal of goulash, and it cannot be attained easily, but we cannot dismiss it as an illusion or choose not to be loyal communists just because there is a long way to go. Our revolutionary ideals are of supreme importance. Communism is the ultimate ideal of communists, and it needs generations of strenuous effort to achieve. If we all see it as no more than an illusion, if we deem it unworthy of hard work and sacrifice, communism will never come.
Society never prospers. Society can only prosper if old men plant seeds for trees they will never sit in the shade of. You must always continue to push society forward in the direction where you know the outcomes will be beneficial for all people, not just the hand-selected few. Today's failures should not take away from your revolutionary optimism.
What we do today in upholding and developing Chinese socialism is the real effort towards the ultimate ideal. Revolutionary ideals are more important than anything else. The party is called the Communist Party of China because since day one, our party has made communism its highest ideal. The reason our party is able to rise again and again through hardships and adversities is because the party has always held on to this great ideal and aspiration. In addition to the Chinese classics of Marxism-Leninism, members of the Communist Party are also encouraged to gain an appreciation of the best traditions of Chinese thought, such as Confucianism. Confucian ideals of ethical leadership, moral governance, and social harmony align well with the party's focus on integrity, particularly in regards to anti-corruption efforts. Xi Jinping sees Confucianism as complementary to the larger framework of socialist governance, integrating it into a larger Marxist framework and worldview. But Xi Jinping further argues that it is necessary to study the great teachings of other cultures as well. The Communist Party of China was conceived based on a European critique of capitalism and a Russian example of revolutionary struggle. Therefore, the ideological foundation of the Communist Party of China is firmly grounded in the works of foreign cultures. Xi Jinping argues that it is necessary for China to continue learning from other cultures, but warns of the danger of becoming overly subsumed by Western influence. A number of people, even including some party members, cannot see the underlying dangers of accepting the universal values that have developed in the West over hundreds of years, along with certain Western political dogma. They argue we need not reject them since we would not suffer any significant harm by accepting them. Some even regard Western theories and discourse as the gold standard and thus unconsciously become trumpeteers of Western capitalist ideology. Studying Marxist classics, the theory of socialism with Chinese characteristics, the great works of traditional Chinese culture, as well as the worldly literature of other civilizations, is necessary for cultivating strong socialist values and practices. Xi Jinping explains that the core socialist values that we should cultivate and practice are prosperity, democracy, civility, harmony, freedom, equality, justice, the rule of law, patriotism, dedication, integrity, and friendship. This not only means adhering to the constitution, direction, and strategy of the party, but going beyond what is required through a sense of patriotic and socialist duty in contributing towards national rejuvenation. The ideal party official is honest, well-read, incorruptible, pragmatic, and unwavering in his or her commitment to the lofty goal of achieving a communist society. However, only a small minority of party members approach this high standard. Some party officials have learned socialist theory by rote and don't have a firm grasp on how their role relates to the broader social totality. Some party officials
He said, some of y'all only learn socialism through memes. Democracy, yet he made himself premier for life and changes the constitution to remove term limits. Oh my God, bro. Hello? It's a one-party structure regardless. That's just not how Chinese democracy works. Confucianism is one of the few areas where the CCP loses me ideologically due to many reactionary elements that can be found in Confucian thought. I still fuck with the vision, though. I'm confused about capitalism argument. As a new watcher, I don't think communism is the answer. I would suggest something more like what Europe has, but they still maintain a capitalist economy. It is interesting how you are against imperialism but support authoritarianism. No, because I understand that every governance structure is inherently authoritarian, regardless of however many fucking parties exist within it. Because ultimately, that is what the government is. Authority. Okay? Enforcing the authority. You can either do that at the behest of the dictatorship of a handful, a hand-select group of people, capital owners, or you can do that by enforcing the wishes of the large majority of the population. So one-party government is the answer? No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm simply stating that whether there's one party, two parties, three parties, or 100 parties, the reality of the matter is still the same. A government is going to be authoritarian. Let's say someone wants to be a pedophile. It is incredibly authoritarian for the government to say, you can't be a pedophile. That is illegal. Every rule, technically, is stopping someone from doing something that they want to do. The government is a mechanism of authority. Weird way to say it, but no, I think it's important. I think it's important to understand that. That is a well-established hallmark of government. So authoritarian in this sense, which, by the way, you said it's interesting you are against imperialism but support authoritarianism. How authoritarianism and imperialism, what are you talking about? These are concepts that are completely removed from one another. Technically, America is not an authoritarian nation, right? It's the beacon of liberal democracy. It also happens to be the most imperialist nation. You're substituting two utterly irrelevant concepts here. An authoritarian nation cannot be, an authoritarian nation could very well be not imperialist, but it doesn't matter. A non-authoritarian nation can be imperialist, but it doesn't matter. There's wrongs for each form of governance and what they're doing.
simply join the party as a means of advancing their careers in the public sector. Others have become complacent, having given up on the prospect of ever achieving a communist society and simply go through the motions. Still others seek to do the bare minimum to get by and avoid making any difficult decisions for fear of being scrutinized and pass the buck down to lower officials. In Xi Jinping's words, the main features of self-indulgence are mental laxity, resting on one's laurels, vanity, coveting pleasure, pursuing ostentation, and seeking to keep oneself amused. Some party officials have become demoralized, and their faith has been shaken. Their philosophy of life is to indulge themselves in pleasure-seeking, drinking your fill as long as you have wine to drink, and seizing the moments of contentment in life and making the most of them. Some have abandoned their ideals in favor of material comforts, vulgar amusements, revelry, drinking, and a life of luxury. Some take on easy tasks and shirk hard work because they have no taste for hardship and effort. They lack motivation and new goals because they are happy with the status quo, satisfied with their limited knowledge and understanding, and content with their past achievements. They idle through the day, flipping through newspapers, drinking.
I think you can do both. Just saying. The pursuit of revolutionary thought should not be something that overtakes every aspect of your life. After all, the entire purpose of building socialism or communism is so that one has time to focus on their own personal joy.
Drinking tea and chatting, their gaze wandering abstractly because they have no purpose.
Yeah, who's talking about party members? Yeah. Yeah.
Xi Jinping's approach to governing China is also informed by the historical lessons drawn from the collapse of the Soviet Union. He cites the failure of the Soviet Union as a warning for China, emphasizing that one of the key reasons for its collapse was the detachment of the Communist Party from the people. In Xi Jinping's view, the Soviet leadership became a privileged group of bureaucrats who served their own interests rather than the broader population, leading to a loss of popular support and ultimately to the downfall of the Soviet Union. For Xi Jinping, this experience serves as a powerful reminder
Alongside collaboration with Western capitalists
of the importance of maintaining a close connection between the party and the people. He insists that Chinese leadership must be vigilant in staying connected to the populace, ensuring that policies are effective and serve the broader public interest. This emphasis on connection between the party and the people is seen as crucial for avoiding the pitfalls that led to the collapse of former socialist states. As China becomes wealthier and people experience a better life, many no longer feel the need to become politically engaged. This is a major concern for the Communist Party and its connection with the people as a fundamental basis for political action. As Xi Jinping says, we must be very clear, there are still many inadequacies in our work and many difficulties and challenges to face. The main ones are as follows: unbalanced and inadequate development, public well-being, poverty alleviation, disparities in developing between rural and urban areas, income distribution, employment, education, healthcare, housing, elderly care, and civic awareness. Decisions made by the Communist Party must be informed by the people through democratic processes at the grassroots level, with active engagement in elections for local people's congresses and village committees, as well as consultative democracy. The challenge of building socialist values, political consciousness, and democratic participation is a growing concern, particularly in regard to Chinese youth. Unlike many previous generations who were required to sacrifice so much to build China's productive forces, Chinese youth today are born into a world where those sacrifices are bearing great fruit. In contrast to the life of struggle carried out by previous generations, the youth of today can expect to enjoy a much freer and more prosperous lifestyle. Under such conditions, the theories of Marxism-Leninism and Mao Zedong thought are increasingly being seen as irrelevant or outdated to the quickly modernizing and prosperous Chinese society. Today's youth often seem less interested in the history of class struggle than they are in new technologies, fashion, music, travel, and Western art. Therefore, the party sees the need to continue educating itself so that it may educate the masses and the youth on the importance of committing oneself to the lofty ideals of communism. The emerging digital realm is one new area of social life that is giving rise to novel social problems. China has more netizens than any other country in the world, and the Communist Party of China encourages them to use the internet as a tool to represent Chinese culture abroad. The rapid technological development seen in the digital realm has opened new opportunities, but has also opened communication networks.
She said, I'm a poster. He said, let a thousand flowers blossom. But this time, not as like a meme or not as a way to squash dissent. He said, for real this time. Let it blossom like for real.
Networks for terrorists and cybercriminals. The internet cannot be a lawless place. The use of the internet to advocate the toppling of the government, preach religious extremism, or incite separatism and terrorism must be resolutely prevented and punished. Under absolutely no circumstances can such activities be allowed.
Yeah, this is the aspect of Xi Jinping governance that clearly I have issues with. But who the fuck am I? I'm just a Western chauvinist pig living in a country that's black bagging political dissent currently, including my kind of political dissent. So
to go unchecked. Digital platforms have also introduced the problem of online circulation of disinformation. Despite the many historic achievements in advancing human rights and the well-being of the people, the Communist Party of China frequently...
This part, not so wrong. This aspect of it, perhaps kind of forward-thinking. You know what I mean? The misinformation side
comes under attack.
Every new day that I spend on Twitter is another day where I kind of understand the firewall. Every other country that we traffic our brain rot to by way of social media platforms is another day that I understand the Chinese firewall. For sure.
By Western powers through disinformation channels such as Radio Free Asia. With the vast growth in the number of users of microblogs, WeChat, and other social network services and instant communication tools, how to strengthen oversight within a legal framework, guide public opinion, and ensure the orderly dissemination of online information while safeguarding national security and social stability has become a pressing problem for us. A sound atmosphere for the expression of opinion online does not imply that there should be only one voice and one tune. Rather, it means that people are not permitted to conflate right and wrong, circulate rumors, cause trouble, violate the law, or commit crimes. It means that people cannot overstep the boundaries of the Constitution and other laws.
Love how it doesn't mention banning LGBT content and content creators online. Well-being of the people never applies if you're gay and want equal rights in China. I mean, there's many gay celebrities. Like the most famous woman in China is literally trans. Like, you can be gay on Chinese social media. The fuck? Have you been on Xiaohongshu? They are gay as fuck over there. There are some. You're a little uninformed on this topic, buddy. I'm just saying. I'm a little uninformed on this topic. No, advocacy is something that they definitely clamp down on. For sure. But I don't think the idea that you're not allowed to be fucking gay on social media is stupid. I know that is literally not correct. Arcane China, that's so funny. Yeah, dude. Yeah, they also don't let you have blood in video games. Yeah, they have stupid fucking rules, dude. I know. We're not talking about Arcane. We're talking about whether or not you are openly allowed to be a homosexual, lesbian, trans, whatever the fuck on Chinese social media. Yes, they have very weird and, dare I say, stupid censorship rules like skeletons or blood. You can't have fucking blood in video games in China. You also cannot have, I believe it was skeletons too. There's like weird rules. For sure. But that's not what the fucking conversation was about. The conversation is whether or not you can be visibly a queer person. You absolutely can. Yeah, there's literally advertised gay cities in China. They're just aware of how LGBT rights are used by USAID and the CIA to create dissent. No, I don't think it's just that. They're also fucking conservative too. I think there's a little bit of social conservatism involved in this. It's not just like USAID uses gay advocacy, which is true. They do that for sure. Like civil society organizations in an effort to destabilize countries. They do that 100%. Women who try to speak up about abuse, especially those in power, get censored. Women try to speak up about abuse, especially those against power, get censored. They're seen as trouble. It is different. You aren't protected. Okay, that I can't speak on. But, you know, I live in America. And I feel like that is a common through line of misogyny here in the United States of America as well. Like, good luck talking about being raped. You know what I mean? I feel like that's just a universal principle of misogyny under patriarchal constructs. This isn't to say like, this isn't to shelter China from the criticism at all. I don't know enough about this. But our president is Donald Trump. He was convicted through at least he was found in a court of law through civil litigation to have actually raped someone. yes, it's a lower standard, a lower burden of proof than criminal litigation, but come on, you know?
China's economic development has been a driving force in the creation of an emerging multipolar world. This global shift in the redistribution of economic power can be seen in the flourishing development.
Not like trans women are protected in the U.S. either. Chinese trans people can change their ID. Americans cannot. I know. As in the last Trump administration, also we reversed some of the civil liberties, the remaining civil liberties that trans people had over here, as opposed to the Chinese trans population that now unironically outflank us on that too. So that's like another incredibly sad situation for how dire things have become here in the bastion of liberal democracy. You need to start making chatters prove they are not American before they start criticizing China. What do you mean? It's not just America. This is not just an America problem. This is a fucking Western world problem. This is a Turkish problem. This is a problem everywhere. There's issues in China just as there are issues everywhere around the world, chat. This isn't to say that like these issues in China are irrelevant or that China is perfect. Far from it. No country is. My point, however, is always the same, which is that when you look at Chinese governance, and you apply an incredibly critical lens that you do not apply to your own state, it rings hollow. Some people apply that critical lens to their own state, but then apply extra critical lenses to the Chinese state. You have to match what a major power is doing around the globe to the other major power. If we're setting the standard of violence, we have to look to the United States of America. That's what I do. This is what pisses off a lot of Americans, especially American chauvinists. They think this is whataboutism. This is not whataboutism. That's why I always routinely talk about China's actions in the South China Sea. Spraying fucking Filipino boats with water cannons, right? America talks about that act as the most egregious form of violence. This is like at maximum 1,000 miles off the fucking Chinese coastline where they're literally spraying another boat with water. And America considers this to be the most violent act that a state could ever engage in, while America's boats are also in that fucking sea, tens of thousands of miles away. And on top of that, America's doing a fucking genocide in Gaza. Like, what do you mean? Yeah, they have border disputes with India. It's a laughable notion. They literally dress up in full riot gear and fight one another with fucking sticks and stones. When America has a border dispute with a country, which, you know, doesn't usually happen, America has border disputes a world away from the United States of America. They fucking eradicate the entire population. They rape and pillage. They fucking torture people that they take prisoner unjustifiably. And we're over here being like, well, you know, those sticks and stones border conflict they have with India is the most unacceptable form of violence. This is what I mean. This is what I mean. This is what I'm talking about. This is not a defense of America, and it's not a defense of China. But if the standard of violence is supposed to be universal, or our criticisms of violence is supposed to be universal, it's like yelling at your neighbor for being too loud when you are beating the fuck out of your son every night. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, I can't believe you reprimanded your child. How dare you do that as I abuse my son? You know what I mean? This is unacceptable. It's just copium. Or not even fucking, not even abusing your child. It's like being a fucking serial killer and then getting mad at a dude doing MMA. What is this? Gay marriage acceptance by country? 43, 39, 20% support some rights. What is this? What is, oh, the acceptance? Ipsos more urban educated than representative. I'm confused about this. 39, 20% support some rights. 18% not sure. 56% against. Wait, this is the worst way to look at this data. I'm so confused. What a weird but understanding comparison. Yeah, I hope this is eye-opening for some people. Like, I criticize China plenty. It's just that people want me to constantly, like, if I were to talk about America, right, doing something right for once, and that doesn't happen regularly, But let's say in a hypothetical scenario where America did something correct, like Build Back Better, okay? Every conversation has to start off, if I were to talk about America like I talk about China, like the expectation of how I'm supposed to talk about China, okay? I would have to literally start talking about Build Back Better and immediately go chattel slavery, indigenous genocide, okay? Biden's crime bill. Like every single time, instead of talking about Build Back Better, I would have to consistently talk about like the execution of revolutionary leadership, the McCarthyist trials, like Japanese internment camps. I would never, yeah, see, this is it. This is it. NSA mass surveillance, Kent State, Church of Scientology, David Miscavige, May 4th, 1970 massacre, May 13th, 1985 move bombing, 1919 House Un-American Activities Committee, Trail of Tears, Jim Crow, segregation, Human Rights Citizens United, safety, high-speed rail, strong mass line, Republic of Hawaii, 13 colonies, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, Edward Snowden. Some of those are hilarious. But Henry Kissinger, nukes, NSA mass surveillance. Like, it would be ridiculous. I would never be able to talk about like the comings and goings of American politics at all. This is how Americans want me to talk about China. I've covered Xinjiang plenty. I've covered the camps created, the re-education camps that were created for Uyghurs under the boundaries of, under the claim that they were separatists. Some of them were, but that doesn't matter. Like, you can't just do dragnets and mass surveillance over an entire population of people and fucking neuter their cultural, neuter their culture. These are the types of things that I criticize when I'm talking about China. Having said that, however, if Israel treated the Palestinian population in the same way that China treated its Uyghur population, okay, where they have freedom of fucking travel and are full-blown Chinese citizens, okay, at the end of the goddamn day, regardless of the cultural genocide or the re-education or whatever the fuck, okay, the rest of the world, the Western world, will hail Israel as the most moral nation on the fucking planet. Nobel Peace Prize be given out every fucking day. They would run out of peace prizes to give to Israel. There would never be another person that ever received a peace prize because they would talk about how Israel deserves it every single fucking year. Do you understand the cruelty, that the appetite that we have for death and destruction for Western powers and Western aligned powers and an expression of Western imperialism versus like what our supposed enemies do, what our foreign adversaries do? Okay? So it feels weird for me to fucking constantly bring that shit up every single goddamn time. Like when I'm talking about high-speed rail, they'd be like, oh, the Uyghurs. That's it. We have cities that are famous for being gay as fuck, but we are not being persecuted by law. Yes, we want more rights and to be protected by law. On the other hand, the Chinese gay community is somewhat similar to the American gay community in the early 2000s. There's no law of legal marriage, but most people understand it and know that it exists. I'm not saying this is the case since you know more than me, basically all Western people, but do you think the warts of the West are more evident because you live here? Regardless, I don't think it's a matter since America is such a cancer on the world that they're just horrendous. Yes, of course, I don't know the comings and goings of daily Chinese existence. I can simply look from afar, talk to Chinese people, and learn about what the struggles are. Okay, we'll learn what the areas of need are. And there are also other things that I've talked about, like the internal passport structures they have between tier 1 cities and villages, and how obviously not the entirety of China has not completely urbanized at this point, and how there's still a disparity there. Okay, there is plenty of issues in China as well. There are also areas of reform in those. There is a need for reform, and the Chinese government seemingly cares about reforming some of these structures. So yes, I am certainly more in tune with the death, destruction, violence, subjugation that happens in the Western world because I live in the United States of America. But another part of the reason is also because as America is the global hegemonic power, it does not have the need to justify its existence It does not have, it never has seen the need to justify its atrocities, to justify why it's doing the things that it's doing, because it's always been for a higher purpose, maintaining the liberal capitalist order. This is precisely the reason why they can be flagrantly violent, openly violent, and even flex how violent they are. This is also the same reason why America can have freedom of speech. If you recall, almost a year ago or a couple months ago, I reiterated the position that I've held for a very long time. You will see what the boundaries of free speech truly are in the United States of America when America starts recognizing that its material conditions are eroding and it is no longer the most powerful nation on the planet. America, throughout periods of struggle, like the civil rights struggle or during periods of war, have shown that they do not have any care or consideration for free speech. Look at the McCarthyist trials, for example. Look at the assassination of revolutionary black leaders, for example. So this does not mean that there isn't free speech or more expansive free speech. I'm not a free speech absolutist. There's no such thing anyway. Obviously, there's limitations to that regardless, but America seemingly has the most liberal opinion when it comes to free speech, and yet the reason why I say America has the most liberal opinion when it comes to free speech is because America is the most powerful nation on the planet. And the more they lose that grip of power, the more you will learn that free speech is not a right, but simply a privilege that the most powerful nation on the planet was able to maintain. And it's going away. It's going away already. It's going away at a rapid, alarming rate. Something that I actively fight back against.
Of Chinese projects, notably the Belt and Road Initiative and the BRICS multilateral partnership. Under Xi Jinping's leadership, China has emerged as a dominant power on the world stage, which has presented hegemonic powers with a new challenge. Many Western countries have regressed back into economic nationalism, the erection of trade barriers, sanctions, and other soft power tools mobilized to disrupt the creation of a multipolar world. But as Xi Jinping asserts, whether you like it or not, the global economy is the great ocean from which you cannot escape. Any attempt to cut off the flow of capital, technologies, products, industries, and people between economies and channel the waters into the ocean back into isolated lakes and creeks is simply not possible. Indeed, it runs counter to the historical trend. The history of humanity tells us that problems are not to be feared. What should concern us is refusing to face up to problems and not knowing what to do about them. The persistent
You are fucking ignorant and defending you fucking take. Absolutely fuck you for this take, but we aren't those people who ignore what the West does. Fucking educate or fucking take the trans hate, you piece of shit. That doesn't imply acceptance at all, and that means we should call out fucking China for trans hate. Fuck your take, showing his fucking ignorance towards trans issues. What? What is going on? Calm down. What? Hello? What? Explain what your gripe is. I am confused. we must nuke China to liberate the trans community of China. What is happening here? The Chinese nation does not like her. She talked about it often. You are wrong. You fucking can't. The trans woman you were talking about was almost thrown out. She talked about it and how it's okay to be a femboy, but not actually fucking gay or trans. You are wrong here. You are fucking playing it down, and that's a problem. Fuck you for this take. China hates trans and queer people. Like, fuck America, but don't claim China is good to queer people. I didn't say that China is good to queer people. I just said that given this current administration that I suspect you live under and its initiatives against trans people, China is now better to queer people, including trans people, than the United States of America is. I didn't say China is a bastion of queer liberation. But I also don't understand what this smoke is like. What the fuck? Yeah, you're also wrong about saying the Chinese nation does not like her. She is literally the largest television star in China. What the fuck? Like, not every country is like Thailand, all right? You know, which is objectively the gayest nation. Objectively, the most pro-queer country on the planet. It's true. Woke land. Did this chatter just like get mad and then leave? Like, what the fuck happened?
of regional conflicts, terrorism, poverty, unemployment, economic crises, refugee waves, and widening income gaps are problems that have accelerated under the global economy shaped by unipolarity and Western universalism. But these problems are not inevitable outcomes of economic globalization. Rather, they are the consequences of excessive pursuit of profit by financial capital and the grave failure of financial regulation. War, conflict, and regional turbulence have created many problems, and their solution lies in making peace, promoting reconciliation, and restoring stability. Simply blaming economic globalization for the world's problems is neither consistent with reality nor helpful in finding solutions. Xi Jinping sees a bright future for China, enabling it to play a role on the world stage to promote peace and cooperation among multiple poles of power, rather than domination and submission to a single one. I have made it clear again and again that China's door will never be closed. It will only open even wider. China will never waver in its effort to pursue high-quality opening up. China will never falter in its efforts to pursue an open world economy, and China will never relent in its efforts to pursue a global community of shared future.
This was a great video. I didn't know this channel existed, but I like it. Look, I'm trans, so I'll weigh in. We just need to accept that there isn't anywhere that's particularly good to us right now. This is a new info. China is improving. The U.S. is receding. Many other Western countries are being reactionary against our rights as well. Thailand isn't even perfect. There's still discrimination even if their healthcare initiatives are better. Yeah. There's a big trans Bilibili creator who does a lot of trans-related skits, and she's openly trans to the point where she's listed out all the operations and medications she's taken, and even listed the prices. Lamau. Yeah, I'm like, people bring this kind of stuff up because I think they read like a Pink magazine article or something, but they don't investigate it any further. It just doesn't match what I have seen. Maybe I don't know for sure. I'm willing to admit that, but I think that's the problem here. They read like they literally read like a USAID subsidized fucking article written by some dude from a think tank being like, China is working to kill every queer person or whatever, and then they go, this is the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. And then they turn around and they're just like, no, you don't understand. Like, yeah, transgender woman. This is from Radio Free Asia. Transgender woman. This is literally Voice of America. Okay, this is American CIA newspaper. Transgender woman wins payout in China for electroshock conversion therapy. Ling Er wins unprecedented compensation after being incarcerated in a psychiatric facility. A transgender woman in China who won an unprecedented compensation. I feel like you can't do that in America even. The woman, known only by her nickname Ling Er for fear of reprisal, recently made headlines after winning 60,000 yuan, $8,300 in compensation in connection with illegally administered electroconvulsive therapy inside of the Qinhuangdao No. 5 hospital in the northern province of Hebei. No, they do electroshock therapy in America and in other Western nations as well. I'm saying that I don't think you'd be able to win compensation against it. Japan also isn't perfect with LGBTQ rights, but they're not going to tell you to shut the fuck up whenever you glaze Japan, Lamau. God damn, dude. Holy shit.